Welcome back for another confirmation lesson. This one will be from Luke chapter 12. And you can, Luke chapter 12, and we'll start with the 13th verse. This is another parable that Jesus tells, but it is in response to a question that is asked of him. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Oh, and I forgot, if you do not have your Bible or pencil or pen, pause this and go and get your Bible and pencil and pen or pen." All right. We're reading from Luke chapter 12, beginning with the 13th verse. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But Jesus said to him, "Friend, who sent me to be judge or arbiter over you?" Now, this was one of those things in the ancient world. The older brother, and it was always a male, the male would always receive the inheritance. It's just the way things worked back then. So the older brother received everything, but he was required to give something to, or expected, not required. There was no law requiring this, but he was expected to share it with his younger siblings. This is the way it should have happened, and was more or less a kind of a moral sort of thing, not a legal thing. He can't get thrown in jail for not doing it. It's a moral thing. So Jesus is a religious leader. So the guy goes to Jesus to settle this moral matter, and he's fully expecting Jesus to say, "Yeah, tell your brother that I said he should share the inheritance with you." But Jesus won't hear this. And here's why. And here's the parable. And Jesus said to him, "Take care. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." Then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly. And he thought to himself, "What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax. Eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool! This very night your life is being demanded of you, and the things that you were prepared, whose will they be?' So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God." All right. So you have a situation where Jesus is asked to arbitrate and everybody's expecting him just to tell this older brother to do the moral thing and share his property. But Jesus doesn't have it, and here's why. And it becomes a teaching on possessions and on what is truly important and how greed can interfere with our relationships. And there is nothing more precious than our relationships. Nothing at all. And Jesus is saying that we're given to love God and love our neighbor. That's what we're called to do. Not love the stuff that we might get or whatever. Our love is reserved for God and for those that God surrounds us with. So to drive a wedge into that relationship between the brothers would, in Jesus' mind, be unthinkable. Because you might get the stuff, but you lose your relationship with your brother, and it's not worth it. And Jesus says as much as this, because here's a story about the rich guy. Jesus says the land of a rich man produced abundantly. Sorry about that. This is our second video. What I want you to do is I want you to underline in verse number 16. I want you to underline produced abundantly. And remember from last time when we talked, it was one of those things that Jesus said in the Lord's Prayer, basically, who gives us everything? God. So it wasn't this man who produced abundantly, it was God's gift. And that's important for us to remember. Everything that we have is God's. It's a gift from God, and to treat it as a gift and not just store it up for ourselves. So the man, it produced abundantly. So underline it, put God's gift. And then what I want you to do is I want you to notice, further on down, he decides to build this huge barn because he needs more space for his crops. So he built a large one to store all my grain and my goods. Again, who is he forgetting? He's forgetting that it's a gift from God. My grain, my goods. No, God's grain, God's goods that he has given you to take care of and to use to take care of those you have surrounded yourself with. But notice, because of this guy's greed, what happens? He says to himself, I will say to my soul. And you can underline that in verse 19, and you might be wondering why. It seems, I will say to my soul, so what? Notice, there is nobody around him. He's talking to himself. He's by himself. He's all alone. I will say to my soul, because there's nobody around. His relationships have been destroyed. We're left to think because of his greed and how he has maybe cheated people to get what he thought was his, and it's all mine. And he's a lonely man living a lonely life. So it's important to remember that. He's talking to himself. And then, that very night, he's going to die. And God says, all these things you have prepared, whose will they be? Whose will they be? No one's. And he can't take it with you. So again, it's a call for us to remember what we have is a gift from God. Greed, to be on watch against greed, because greed can destroy our relationships like crazy. And there's no amount of stuff that's worth our relationship with another person. And we're called to use the stuff God gives us actually to help those other people. So to remember that. So that our assignment for this week is the guy's land produced abundantly. Why did it produce abundantly? Answer that. Question number 1. Why did it produce abundantly? Question number 2 is the guy is talking to himself. Why is he talking to himself in this parable? Question number 3. What is the most important thing? The stuff we have or the relationships we have? And then explain why that thing is the most important. The stuff we have or the relationships that we have. You guys have a great rest of your day. God's peace.